Chainsaw Man Chapter 150 just messed with my emotions in a major way because as an animal lover, wow, Fujimoto, wow. It takes a special kind of cruel to kill off innocent animals in that way, including freaking Meowy, the last thing that Denji had connecting him to power from Chainsaw Man Part 1. But at the least, the deaths that happened, they kind of happened off screen. But this is another very effective way of stripping away the layers of Denji and making him suffer before he inevitably transforms back into Chainsaw Man. While Asa Mitaka isn't a bad character, it's moments like this that we get in this chapter that make you look back at Denji's character and go, Jesus, the pain and suffering, but in a good way. However, let's back things up and let's look at the chapter itself so we can go further into the review. So we continue on where we left off, where you have this adorable scene of Denji giving Nayuta a piggyback ride through the streets, and we see just how crazy this world of Chainsaw Man is. It doesn't matter that there's devils running around or that there's been a war between public safety and the Church of Chainsaw Man that comes complete with a bunch of fraud Chainsaw Mans running around. It's just business as usual for anybody that's alive. Nayuta makes it a point to point out that people are still going back to work like nothing happened, and she says they're probably gonna have to go to school tomorrow. And what I love about this is that it is a very effective writing tool to show us the world of Chainsaw Man through the lens of a child. Only a child would look at everything that just happened and go, man, it really sucks, I'm gonna have to go back to school tomorrow. It's a simplistic way of viewing the world, but it's one that's effective nonetheless, and I like how Fujimoto takes that moment to contrast it with Denji. Whereas Nayuta is thinking about the chore that is going back to school and going through everyday normal life, Denji is the one thinking most like an adult, even though he ironically is still just a child himself. He's thinking about his responsibilities, which range from making sure Nayuta practices good hygiene, which you wouldn't think is that big of a deal, but in my experience, there's something to trying to make sure that kids properly brush their teeth before they go to bed. Like, wow. We see Denji thinking about the responsibility that comes from walking the pets to make sure that they get their proper daily exercise, which is a former owner of a Labrador Retriever and Pit Bull mix. I totally understand that because my old dog Prince required walking at least a mile a day to get his energy out, and even then that wasn't enough. So I can't imagine Denji and Nayuta having to walk 7 dogs and carrying Meowy on top of that. Yet we see that Denji does just that with his everyday routine. We see Denji step on a crow before he begins to start talking to Pochita, and what I love about this scene is that it's Fujimoto using the background as a proper setting to answer a major question that we've been exploring in the last couple arcs of Chainsaw Man, which is Denji actually happy living his everyday normal life, or does he miss the thrill that comes from being Chainsaw Man? Is it too much into his identity now? Yoshida in the past came to him like, look man, you wanted a normal life. This is your chance for that normal life, to be a normal high school student. But in exchange, you can't transform into Chainsaw Man anymore. And we've been seeing and watching as the world is slowly forcing him to accept the fact that no matter what he does to escape it, he is forever going to be Chainsaw Man. It's part of his soul. With the background, we see Denji and Pochita talking amidst the blank background, a mix of white and gray colors. It's an accurate representation of Denji's soul. White is normally associated with calmness and with purity, yet there are shades of gray all throughout the panels because Denji himself isn't a truly pure person. He's a lot like us in that he has more shades of gray to his character, which is why the questions being asked to him in this moment are so important amidst this backdrop in particular. Denji flat out says that he wants to be Chainsaw Man. Pochita is asking him, do you want girlfriends? Do you want money? His answer is both pure and morally gray because he says again, I want to be Chainsaw Man. He wants the very thing he can't have because if he transforms, he has to say goodbye to the normal life he has with Nayuta and potentially Nayuta as well, which makes that moment earlier hit that much harder because we literally saw Denji show Nayuta how much he loves her, saying, I love you this much, despite her thinking that she might one day take the side of the devils in the war that's coming up. It's just building towards that inevitable split between Denji and Nayuta. The heartbreak is coming. Fujimoto then takes a step further by showing the apartment building that they live in on fire, and Barem the flamethrower hybrid is just standing there watching it with this big smile on his face, like that meme of the girl who set the house on fire and is smiling. Barem went missing a few chapters ago, and now we see why. He hasn't given up on his cold and calculated plan to have Denji suffer and transform into Chainsaw Man. After Denji is so grief-stricken at the thought of the pets burning alive that he can't even run without paying attention to his surroundings, he's just solely locked in on trying to save his animals. he's tripped by Barem, who then flat out takes the time to gloat. He says he knew killing Mitaka would get a reaction out of Denji, but it wouldn't be enough to actually push him into true despair. So instead, he went to Denji's family, and he refers to the pets that have been burned alive as being flammable. It's then that we see Denji snap and his hand goes right towards his chest like he's about to pull the ripcord and transform into Chainsman right there on the spot. But before he can actually follow through with it, we see Fumiko and the members of public safety come out of the shadows, opening fire on Barem, while Fumiko specifically is telling them where to shoot in order to avoid him being able to go into his devil transformation. It's another close moment for Denji because she does prevent him from crossing the line, but as you probably come to expect from Fujimoto, things aren't always what they seem, because as they're shooting, a figure drops behind them and slaughters the agents around her, and Fumiko appears as if she's the lucky one because she might have just gotten injured, but at the very least, she wasn't sliced in half like one of the agents we see. So the biggest thing here out of this chapter is that we have to start asking ourselves, damn Fujimoto, just how much is Denji going to have to suffer before he inevitably transforms back into Chainsaw? This was brutal, but again, I think it's something that was needed for his character, because we've seen two things with Denji's character, which are the need to slowly continue the dehumanization of the character that we saw all the way back when Denji first met Makima, and the need for Denji to grow through suffering. It's what sets Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen apart from the other shonen that we see, because they don't mind walking the line and taking away plot armor from the characters. Nobody in the story is safe, and that's the way it should be, even if it goes against the conventional wisdom that you have with gateway shonen like Naruto or My Hero Academia or Fairy Tail. Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, they're not those types of series. They don't even try to pretend to be those types of series. They let you know very early on as you experience the story that nobody is safe. So when death happens, you know death happens quickly, it happens suddenly, and it's gonna be brutal. And it's going to be meant for the sake of traumatizing the main character in order to stimulate growth, which is completely fine. The next thing we have to look at here is, why is the Justice Devil seemingly back in the picture here again? It's becoming this random boogeyman who pops out every few arcs or two if this is indeed the Justice Devil, which I don't mind personally. It's a long-term storytelling, and for a series like Chainsaw Man, where we're accustomed to devils popping up and getting dealt with right away, unless it's a long-term play like the Gun Devil or Makima, which, depending on how this is handled, the Justice Devil or whatever devil this is actually ends up being, has the potential to have the impact that the Gun Devil had, but on a smaller scale. Which brings us to the next question. If this is our Gun Devil equivalent for part 2 of Chainsaw Man, then who is the Makima of this situation? It can be easy to say it's the ever so looming Death Devil that we know is one of the 4 horsewomen, given how things been built up. But when you look at Makima, it was a slow build up to all the foul stuff she did at the end. And while there were red flags all over the place leading up to it that she was gonna be the final villain of part 1, with Fami and Nayuta, we have those red flags that make you think they might be some type of an end-game scenario for Denji, but it's also worth noting they could also be red flags, or rather red herring. I'm going to be very curious to see how Fujimoto does handle this one, but I'm curious to know you guys' thoughts down in the comment section below.